Right on how.
Yeah. I walk
Always
around with
on.
somebody filming me always, just so that I remember, right? Like, look, you're always out in the public view.
That's right. When I think of on how I think of living the American dream, man. You are always optimistic, always passionate, always telling me a new and interesting way to think about things. So I appreciate you joining us. It's great to see you.
No, thank you. I happy to be here. Like any time that I can spend with the two of you, I think is time well spent. Um, Plus, it's a nice excuse to dig myself out of a mountain of emails that I probably need to respond to. So if you're watching and I owe you a reply, listen, I'll get to it as soon as I'm done here.
That's right. If it's truly important, we all agree to boost it to the top. I think that should be true for everybody because I'm also sitting on way too many unread emails. So apologies across the board. But we actually crossed paths on how we worked together a little bit when you were at Ginnie Mae and I was at Rocket, and then when you were at Housing Policy Council and I was at Rocket, and then we both got to work side by side at Stavvy. So this is a great time to be talking because we're launching into a new year. We can talk about digital mortgage, and we have an entire administration change. You've been there in DC. You're a Beltway expert from your time there and still closely connected. So I hope you don't mind. We could talk about all the above.
I don't mind. I don't know that I have any intel that any of us haven't seen.
None of us have.
Flash across the news, but happy to at least give you my point of view where it might be useful. And I never thought about it that way. But you're right. It's like we've crossed paths multiple times, multiple roles. Had a chance to see you operate, from different perspectives. So it's maybe that's why I do feel like more of a brotherly connection here more than anything else, Potter. So
what was Potter best at?
Feelings mutual.
Look, Potter, I think. Has a unique ability, which like I'm kind of envious of him for this, right? To be honest, if I have to be very honest, I think when you sit with Jeremy one-on-one, Jeremy has this pretty cool ability to make you feel like you're the only person he's speaking to, right? I think it's the fact his pace, right? I'm a visual thinker as a result. I think that makes me a very fast speaker, right? But Jeremy's more, has a better cadence. So I think anytime I've sat down with Jeremy, it's like, oh man, we're in the middle of a conference. Is he really talking to just me? So
that's a great thing. That's true. Yeah, I've met I think hundreds of people I know and hundreds or thousands of people I don't know tell me that Jeremy is their best friend. So it's a unique capability to get people to feel that way about you.
Listen, if I got on a plane today, right, just had a random idea to get on a plane, go take a 4-day getaway in, I don't know, name your country, right? Got off the airport, was a little hungry, went to the closest restaurant at the airport, sat down. The person behind me said, "Hey, where are you traveling from?" Starts chit chat. We get into where are you working? I said, Stavvy. I would not be surprised if they reply to me like, "Hey, does Jeremy still work there?" Right? Like, that would not shock me. So
that's awesome.
As much as I enjoy this, and I do, I appreciate it. Let's shift back to the topics at hand and away from me. But Angel, I think one of the things we always talk about, you and I, is kind of we like to touch base on the state of something, the state of digital mortgage, the state of, where we think the GSEs are going or where we think, FHA is going. So I'll start with digital. We worked together. I left Stavvy to work on some other things in the innovation digital ecosystem landscape. Where are we in terms of lenders and the capital markets, the secondary markets, adopting fully digital closings, not hybrid, not, this and that, but the end-to-end digital experience? What grade would you give it? And what's the outlook for 2025?
Well, listen, I as a previous policy guy, I like to always start with definitions, right? So I think it's important to define our terms, right? And I think by almost any definition other than the definition of what dreamers like you and I would have set as the goalpost back in 2015, 2019, 2020, right? Again, so setting aside from the goalposts that we would have set as the defining factors for success, I think by any other metric, right, it's on a success trajectory. A couple of things that I would point to here, right? It's whether not that digital mortgage me is the equivalent of eNote. I think the digital mortgage ecosystem is far broader and far more comprehensive. But I do think that eNote adoption is a great proxy for as a metric for modernization, digitization, right? Because it is sort of a key component of letting us step away from a paper-based reality of or a paper-based model for doing business. So look, if eNote adoption was its own company, right, we would be seeing a 2x to 3x trend for the last 4 years. And again, I think so from any definition, right, to be able to be doubling adoption rates year over year, I think that's again a great success. But I point to other metrics too, right? In that it's not just the pace of adoption, but also, it's going to sound almost silly, right? But the nature of it. And this is what I mean by that, right? So if we looked at, again, just dialing back, got a little time machines, went back, 4 or 5 years, 2019, 2020, the number of lenders with just the capability of doing things like e-closing and eNotes, we could probably count with our two hands, right? That is just not true today, right? Like the number of lenders is far greater. You can see when you look at GSC deliveries, when you look at Genie deliveries, but when you also when you look at the product mix, right? eNotes and e-closings was closely tied ultimately with refis. So what's again encouraging for me, or I think exciting for me, if I think about rates of adoption, is that refis just as part of the overall mix into annual originations has, I think no news for anyone, is a small sliver, say a shadow of what it used to be. So by necessity, right, that 2x year over year growth has really been experienced in the purchase side of the equation, which was always seen as the place where it would be more difficult, right? Mm-hmm. Because of the orchestration that has to happen with title and settlement, right? Increasing orchestration as you add more parties to the equation just seemed to be again a bigger challenge, is in that the lender wasn't going to be able to fully govern how that went. So I think from if I look at digital transformation, digital mortgage, and I use that as a proxy, that points to some pretty aggressive growth. I don't think that's the only place, though, right? Again, understanding that when we say digital mortgage or digital mortgage ecosystem, we mean something far broader. I also look at the servicing side of the house, right? And again, not just the execution, not just shifting from doing something like paper months to e-months, which again that's seen a bit of a pickup now reflected in policy, right, across the GSCs, across FHA. Right, but even we look at other components, right? So, like I think as we speak, right, there's FHA has a pilot out for figuring out how can now servicers begin to electronically deliver to the agency things like partial claims. Again, so again, we're beginning to see that paperless aspect of doing business, right? At the very least, looking for ways to eliminate the friction that comes with having to deal in paper, reflected in other places. I was just and I just feel like I'm going on my soapbox here. But I was just at a couple of panels where we're speaking about just advances in servicing and baseline customer expectation shifts, and this again. So forget about the closing. Now, once you already have a customer, right? The idea of I don't maybe want to talk to somebody on the phone. I want to maybe be able to like request assistance if I need to right from my mobile, right? We're certainly seeing a big trend both in demand and the number of products that are being put into the marketplace to do that. And again, and the focus, again, when I speak with services that they have on having the ability to rely more and more on self-serve models that, again, inherently are technology based, are paperless. So again, I think from a number of proxies, it's all signals in the right direction. Volume, I think, is probably the fuel that any of these segments need to really balloon into a nice, warm, cozy fire that will keep us warm this cold time of year. But it's cyclical. I think we all got to be prepare in the down cycle for the volume to come ahead, whether it's in originations or again in increased servicing activity.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up the servicing aspect of the digital signing, digital delivery, because I often forget about that. I am so focused on the production side, or have been for a while, that that's a really good point, because that will help people justify. I mean, the biggest mistake I made at Stavvy, I think there were two, but the biggest mistake, one was, who is the actual customer? And I just always had the consumer in mind. I always had the consumer demand in mind. I was always trying to get the question in the workflow to ask the consumer, would you like to close this digitally if possible? And I learned the hard way that often the referral source or the mortgage loan officer or the branch manager is the actual customer. In many cases, Fannie and Freddie are the actual customer. So I learned that lesson, and that's been helpful. And then I think the other thing was just layered value. I tried really hard, and I think we still do, I know you do, to talk about all the different value adds that digital delivery, digital signing, digital mortgage, and data management offer. But a lot of those layers of value flow to different parts of the ecosystem. And so you have to sell the servicing side. The partial claim side would be huge in order to really tip the scales, especially with IMB lender servicers, about why this can be holistically valuable, and then make a better case internally. So that's a really good outlook. Also, really good advice for everybody listening. Appreciate that. What else? Brock, before I change the subject, which I'm always keen to do, what did I miss?
I'm super far outside my school of anything I know anything about with your guys' conversation.
Under the hood?
Happy to hang out.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Let me speak to a different dynamic that's at play now, just in everything, that I think is also weighing quite favorably in favor of digital adoption. And look, I was just down at the MISMO conference down in Destin, and there probably wasn't a working group, a panel, a session where the two-letter topic of the last 12 months wasn't mentioned, right? AI. And I will not talk about that here just because everybody else is talking about it. I bring it up only to say that, I do think that for like more traditional, and maybe traditional is not even the right word, right? But for everyone else that has been selling things other than AI for some time, the level of discussion in AI has been such a huge boost, only because it makes things that have made sense for a long time just seem like, oh, well, yeah, of course, of course that makes sense, right? I think that, the level of conversation that people are having as to what we're going to be once we fully implement this across all business processes, right, is putting that mile marker of where we need to go in terms of automation and delegating to technology to such a point on the road that, by comparison, right, doing things like, more automation in underwriting, right, or faster adoption of electronic signatures, more availability for how you perform closings, more availability for how you interact with customers through like portals and chatbots, right? That almost, again, by comparison, seems like, oh that's of course we're gonna have that, right? We can't be speaking about all these incredible things that we're gonna do if we don't at the very least have these subcomponents already in place. Primarily because I think my perspective is that no proprietary implementation of any AI tool is gonna be optimized until each entity has rigor, control and discipline around its data controls, data processes, right? And I think to have that clean, you got to digitize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's been similar in I'm mostly on the real estate side, or sort of like connectivity between real estate and mortgage side, I guess. And it's been similar where, a huge portion of partners on both sides, whether you consider our real estate partners or our mortgage partners, we kind of sit in the middle, didn't want to integrate CRMs in the past. The data sharing was going to be difficult. Like, they'll just log into our system and do this and do that. And maybe occasionally there were good reasons for that, but mostly it was just like, that tech seems really advanced to have our CRMs talk to each other. That conversation has shifted dramatically, that it's like, it seems absolutely silly not to integrate with every single partner of any size now, because they know that we need to, because maybe it just got normalized of like, you move the needle so far with all the AI conversations that you're having every day, in whether it's as a consumer, as a person, reading the news, whatever, driving a car that's trending towards autonomous driving, like whatever. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe my mortgage CRM can integrate with a few more systems. That doesn't seem as crazy as it did 3 months ago.
That's a great point. Do you see AI making that easier? Is anybody using AI to like accelerate those? Because one of the biggest complaints I've always heard in mortgage is ICE, Soft Pro, Total Expert, whatever the giant platform is, controls your destiny, whether or not you get in line, how you get in line, how you get prioritized to get inside of those systems. From an integration perspective, are you seeing any changes there?
Well, platforms like Zapier, and stuff like that,
True.
that have
Yeah.
always kind of sat in between. I think
API toolkit.
yeah, like API toolkits that have existed for however long,
Mhm.
I don't know, 10 years, 8 years. It seems like they're a lot easier to use. We've had a lot more clients that I wouldn't have expected to say, hey, can you just play with our Zapier kit, to say that. And so I don't know if that's AI, probably not, but it's like, I think it's just like ease of use of
comfort level. Yeah.
Ease of use and comfort level of data tools, like dramatically increasing.
And look, I think even the way you can augment, the own resources that you would use to be able to complete an integration. I mean, I definitely have seen it used in that regard, and I think holds a great upside, right? To kind of like augment. I think there's anything in the quality of the development cycle that again probably. It's always an area of concern. Again, I think in those spaces, right? Like AI tools will be great. But yeah, I mean, look, even if we didn't reach that optimum stage anytime soon, again, I think the way it's moved the conversation ahead is has been a bit shocking to me, to be quite honest, right? So one of the servicing suite tools that we have in our suite. Really deals with like helping automate, right, loss mitigation applications, right, where we're able to intake, right, whether it's a streamlined situation or non-streamlined, automate some of the intake of income and assets data, plug that into an underwriting rules engine, right, that can provide a result. And if I think back at maybe conversations even just 2 years ago. Sometimes for prospects that seemed a bit scary. Like, wait, the system is doing the collection of information, the intake, the initial assessment, processing and underwriting, and all I have to do is like validate. Can you put more? Can you give me more control points before it continues doing all of that, right? So that would have been like the tenor of the conversation then, right? Again, AI has moved the goalpost so much that now when I show this. The conversation was like, well, do I really have to have an underwriter review? Can we just have it like show it back to the consumer? I mean, it's like I trust it, right? It's
great.
So it really has put some wind beneath it. So
No, you said the magic word. I mean, trust, right? So we've seen for a really long time what I don't know if it's just because of the capabilities or, like you said, the behavioral economics of how I think about tech, but it's like a lot of mortgage companies bought tech and then didn't trust it, or bought tech, gave it to people and didn't change their process or didn't change the way they do work. And then they just ended up with both tech and people. And we know, or at least what I've always said, on how you've heard me say this hundreds of times at Savvy, the idea of digitization, the idea of delegating to technology is to get your people working on harder problems. We have a shit ton of hard problems in this industry, and we have really, really complex problems in housing, in housing finance. We have no shortage of things we need to do around renovation, home improvement, construction, all of the different ways we think about financing equity and home equity in this industry. We're just scratching the surface. We have tons of things we can put people on that will bring tremendous revenue and growth to this industry, and we don't do it. And now you're saying is like we're seeing a fundamental shift where if I do start trusting technology and I do bring my people back or don't have to lay them off to begin with, I can start putting them on the harder stuff. And now I have a new product. Now I have a new channel. Now I have a new relationship. Now I have new partnerships. And I'm solving my macro market problem by expanding within the harder stuff that we can do. And I just think there's a ton of it. There's a ton of it that we should be working on. And we can. And so that's encouraging to hear. I'm glad to hear that you're getting that sense from frontline clients.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see, right, how we shift. Look, just allocation of focus. Over the next, as the new administration takes over the next 4 years. I mean, I think, look, there's certainly a big debate around the future of housing finance, and there's a number of voices and opinions, and we have now been in this for far longer than anyone I think ever expected. What I think you pointed something out that I think is pretty fundamental, all right? Like, to some extent, setting aside the debate for what is the right structure to have in place from a policy perspective, again, to continue supporting the level of capital markets activity that we've seen. We have a fundamental priority now, just with the basic economics of supply and demand, right? Like we don't have enough homes. So I think, I am encouraged to, for the opportunity to see perhaps a bigger focus on that, because I do think that's going to be just essential, right? Even if we did everything perfect even if, as a nation, we did everything perfect on the finance side of the equation, all we would do is, create more qualified buyers that still won't have an option unless we do anything to to address the supply side of the situation.
Yeah, one of the things I'm still trying to unlock or figure out is in the wake of the global financial crisis, I think there was a hesitation to overbuild. I don't think that's a secret, or that I'm wrong on that assumption. But then the question that I think I have to ask is, if you had a validated pipeline of home buyers by zip code, which I'm pretty sure this industry has, Brock, you tell me, but if I had an incubated pipeline of validated, underwritten consumers, first-time home buyers in every zip code in America, what's the hesitation? I'm still trying to understand, like, why not find those zip codes? If I have 2,000 pre-approved first-time home buyers in this county or in this zip code, I could build 200 homes. That's not that conversion metric is pretty strong, 10%, right? Like, what?
Yeah.
I'm
do
still
this.
baffled.
You know what's weird? They do this. I was talking to a company recently. They do this for build to rent scenarios where they figure out how many renters there are and they build to rent. But they don't. But there's like, obviously there's like the classic builder financing, pay in advance for a condo that's not done yet type of stuff. But it doesn't seem to the same level as like a company just building out a whole strategy of like, let's test demand, let's meet demand, let's sell pre-orders or whatever. It seems, and I think probably you guys both know better than me, I'm guessing, but that seems like a lot of that's because there's been so many red flags thrown on how to develop homes in at all different levels, but especially local levels, it sounds like, from what I hear around the world. I'm no expert on that. But yeah, you'd think, and hey, maybe with a Pulte family member being tapped for FHFA, right, by Trump's administration potentially, maybe there's going to be a lot more aggressive builder conversations, builder easing of building problems. I don't even know the right way to say that. Tensions with home builders, things like that. It seems like directionally that would be good. It may throw out a lot of other downstream problems, but I mean, I think it's hard to argue that we aren't that we're building enough. We're not.
So that kind of tees up a great question, because there has been a lot of speculation. Angel, we'll ask you one of the Brock best things I saw Angel do as far as like audience interaction goes when we were working together was he brought a literal crystal ball on stage once, which everyone jokes about it and uses it as a imagery or a metaphor. And in this case, it was literal. And I always remember that. I always think of it, Angel. So let's do this just for here for the last question or two that we have you. If you were going to be a advisor, consultant to this industry, to mortgage companies this year, 2025, what advice would you give them about how to watch GSE reform or how to watch what goes on in the FHFA world? And what are some of the things you'd say, keep an eye on this, and that'll help you pivot or that'll help you be ready? Do you have any sense of what you would give as that advice just for this year to be on the lookout for so that people can be prepared?
Oh, that's a new flavor of that question. So let me savor for just a little bit.
Yeah, we've got you for a few minutes here, 2 minutes or so. So we'll get you going.
No, so I look, I think there's there's a couple of items I think remain true regardless of what happens with GSE reform, and they probably deal with some of the baked in incentives that exist for GSE deliveries, right? So as we look at the growth of, for example, the year-over-year growth on loan limits, right, or perhaps how there's incentives created through the LLPAs. I think those are two areas that, again, if I had to predict, are probably up for a shift, at least from the trend that we've seen. So again, so if you're someone that is wants to operate like in the jumbo space, right? Perhaps that pivots how you're planning for that. Maybe begin re-engaging some of your investors if you think that, again, that there may be a smaller footprint.
Get smaller. That's right.
But on the GCs in that regard, so that's certainly one. I think. Look, there's also been a whole lot of customer-facing technology, for lack of a better term, that I think has been incentivized by some of the activities that GSEs have done. Right? Even I think about even, for example, like DPA 1, right, that Freddie Mac is rolling out to kind of like help lenders implement down payment assistance programs. So I think there's been again probably a big focus on that outreach. I think not knowing what the future would be and not knowing sort of how much of those mandates stay through or to what degree, perhaps it's worth thinking about how it is that you reach different markets, right? Perhaps even lower credit markets, absent some inherent incentives in the capital market structure, right? And again, like again, setting aside the housing finance things, I would hope, right? I would hope, one thing that I think is worth highlighting from, the way that the Trump administration got to be the Trump administration is just the broad level of support that it received from across constituencies, right? And I think there's a level of constituencies here, including rural home buyers or perhaps folks not ready to buy the $800,000, $900,000 homes that are now being delivered to the GSEs that have been underserved, right? So we speak about who's not being served. I think there's a lot in the middle and lower middle that have not. And I would expect a focus on, having again a framework in place that incentivizes activity for those segments. So I think looking at the portfolio of products, figuring out how you can, and maybe I'm hoping for that from a bit of a self-service perspective, right? Because one of the I think one of the issues in doing some of those loans is just the unit economics on lower balance loans. So I think that also prompts a rethinking of, like, what is my cost to produce? How do I continue to reduce my manufacturing costs to be able to leverage and hit those other segments? So
yeah, that's a real meaty problem that I hope to work on as well, as technology converges with this market, to your point. And that's I think those are great identified bullet points to be focused on, man. Always really appreciate it. I know you have to go. We really appreciate your time. We respect your time. Angel, you are always a wealth of knowledge. Anybody who's watching this doesn't know Angel, reach out, because he's the best of the best in this industry, man. Good to see you. Always appreciate it.
Jeremy, see you guys soon. Bye-bye.
All right, take care. Any closing thoughts, Brock, as we wrap up here for the weekend?
Sure, why not? Lions score?
Oh,
question mark.
So the over-under's like 55 or 56 or something. So it seems like Vegas thinks that we're talking about a shootout, particularly as it gets like towards the fourth quarter. So it could be one of those ones where the halftime score is not quite indicative of what happens as everybody gets tired. Adrenaline will be up. It's going to be loud in the building. I saw something on Instagram that they are piping in crowd noise in the practice facility so that the Commanders can try to get ready. They won't be ready. When I was at the Vikings game, it was the loudest decibel count I've ever seen at a pro sports arena. It was 118 at one point.
Yeah.
Usually when you see like basketball games, or you see Kansas City, which is an outdoor stadium, or you see some of these other like really loud stadiums, Seattle, Texas A&M, you're at like 111, 112, 115. I mean, 117, 118 inside Ford Field. Gonna be crazy. But
it's Kansas City that claims that it like registers as an earthquake, right?
Or something like that.
So it was higher than you usually see there. Yeah. I mean, inside it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I had to predict a score, I guess I would probably take like a bigger number, because that's what Vegas thinks, something like 34-24, 34-21 Lions.
Yeah.
But I these playoff games, I hesitate to ever pick over 10 points, just because it's like probably be close. So if I could get Commanders plus 10, maybe, but this is not a sports betting podcast, so don't listen to me. But
looks like Vegas is implying like Lions winning by 10 and scoring mid-30s points, mid-20s for the commies.
Indeed.
The Jaden magic has been crazy, so that'll be maybe
that's what makes it fun.
The Bills Ravens game will be the best game, but no matter what. But this is a close second. Yeah, I'm excited for really all the games.
Although I talked to somebody in Buffalo today, I talked to my friend Frank in Buffalo today, and he said I think it's gonna be like 6 degrees for that game. So advantage Josh Allen, I assume, in that. I don't know. Maybe.
Not like Baltimore is like a really warm place or anything, but it's
true, right? Exactly. It's not like
Buffalo snow game potentially. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, go Lions, and you been getting out into the
Lions and Eagles.
I've seen a lot this last few weeks. It sounds like.
Yeah, I'm trying to get the Pistons are playing better than expected. So there's some fun buzz in town. Anytime Detroit's happy, I'm happy. So hopefully it stays that way. We'll see.
Awesome.
All right, man.
We'll be in touch about all the crazy new news we have by next Friday.
Yeah, thank you for another good conversation. We'll have like a week in review of whatever happens in housing policy in DC. So, all right, man. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you later.
Take care.